Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Skaven Plays. It is time for my Nurgle review, how I build Nurgle, kind of a tier list, just more of my broad thoughts on the book. I've had well over 100 games with Nurgle already in 4.0. I tested every unit in the book multiple times, and these are kind of my thoughts. I have them listed out into tiers. I have some core builds, some strategies, and some suggestions. Before I get into that, though, I want to give you some background as to me as a player. I've been playing for well over 3 years. I've gone to several GTs. My usual record is about 4-1. I've played for Team Australia in Worlds in Amsterdam, and there I went 6-0. Not wholly on my own part. Stu's pairing process was amazing, and I got 3 Nurgle mirror matches, which was a good time for me, I'll say. But I am experienced with Nurgle. I have a good amount of wins under my belt. I can be a competitive player and a casual player. You'll notice a lot of the videos I upload to the channel aren't me trying to go hard in the paint, because I'm trying to make more entertaining videos. That being said, if you guys do want to see more competitive ones, I did put a couple that were more competitive up, and I can do more like that if you would like it. I'm trying to keep it more fun and entertaining. But there's 4 basic tiers I have here, and I'm going to go through them one by one and explain my reasonings. This tier here contains drones, Horde, the Sorcerer, Rotmire Creed, Bile Piper, and Plague Bearers. This tier I call good for their points. This is almost not undercosted, but like they feel solid where they are. 180 points for drones. They're the fastest thing we have in the book at 8 movement feeds. They're only 180 points, so they're disposable. The Ghoul can resurrect them. They're what gets you your turn 1 tactics and harass ranged units or just muck something up. Horticulus being able to put down a tree. If he gets that tree down and you get disease on turn 1, that can make some games against something like Stormcast or something, especially if you get spread on it, just a no-brainer. You've won the game almost. Rotbringer Sorcerer, he's only 120 points. He's a little hard to fit into list building, I will admit, but 120 points for a caster who can put down another spell, or better yet, remove somebody's ward or lessen it by 1. It's remove if it's death, but is extremely valuable. That and the fact that he can also bring one of these, or well, one of these two, not Gut Rot, as a lieutenant is amazing value for only 120 points. Rotmire Creed, also still extremely good for their points. They're only 130, 12 range, auto wounding on 6s, but the value they bring is just being able to do a little bit of pepper damage from far away. They can keep themselves safe while they do some damage, and they will hand out disease at range, which is something that the army lacks aside from 1 spell, and the trees. It's extremely good. I still recommend one of them in almost every list. I don't care what you're running. Having one of them can help you spread disease to places where you wouldn't be able to spread it normally, and is extremely good. Bile Piper, he's only 110 points. I believe 110. He's either 100 or 110. No, he's 110. The spellbox is 100. But 2 up, -1 to hit, gives us our best chance against things like Ogres and Trolls, which are extremely hard matchups. If you win those, you either had dice on your side or you did a really good job. Plus, they're moving wards on something like, usually a Great Unclean one, or Eroticus. You wouldn't do it to Plague Bears much, unless it's your only option, but it can be very helpful. But it's mainly the -1 to hit, +1 to wound helps a lot, removing wards at times. He's versatile. Only thing is he's a 2-up, which makes it sad. I kind of hope they change it to just working. And Plague Bears are our bread and butter. They went up 20 points, which sucks. But they keep the -1 to hit and shooting, even if they're below 5 models now. And they got crit mortal. To me, that's worth going up 20 points. I believe this unit is extremely solid. Most lists are going to have at least 1 to 2 groups of them. And they're extremely valuable frontline fodder troops. You don't really care if they die. If you have a go, you bring them back. They're your bread and butter troops. Now, this next tier, you'll notice it has some of my favorite models in it. These 4 being my favorite models in all of Nurgle. Not you. You're okay. You're okay, yeah. These 4 are my favorite. This is the tier where they feel okay for their points, maybe a little bit too much. They could stand to drop a little, but where they're at right now, they still perform enough that I consider taking them in most lists. Gut Rot, well, first of all, these two here, they need to be separated for a second. These two are your main ways to spread disease without combat. Horticulus will put a tree down that you can spread disease from the trees. You can drop it right outside of 6 inches. If they countercharge it, they just spent 2 command points to kill a tree. You're fine with that. And depending on what they did it with, they might not even kill the tree. That's worth it. Gut Rot, he drops down with 1 or 2 groups of Rotmire Creed. I usually just do 1 because it's cheap. That's only 300 points right here together. 310 points. But it's extremely good to start getting disease going on your opponent's backline. Plus, I've had a couple lists, one I uploaded to the channel actually, where I used him as the general because you can keep them in the sky for a couple turns, drop them on turn 2, maybe even 3 if they don't have a good opening, and kind of not give your opponent access to slay the entourage at all. It can also, like, well, if they have a ranged unit and they're a general's entourage, they're completely wasted. Priority target? Sure, shoot my Gut Rot and my Rotmire. You're not hurting my Ghoul or whatever else I have. It's extreme value. But that aside, Gut Rot is great for that. Lord of Blights and Lord of Plagues, they feel pretty good if you go a Blight King build. They're not good enough you can bring a ton of them. They're fairly fighty. I think the Lord of Plagues ability is better, but the 3-up save versus a 4-up save is a very large difference as far as durability goes. That being said, I think they're just a little pricey. If they were like 150 instead of 170, I think they would be right down here in the feels very good tier. But as it stands now, I think that they're just pretty good for their points. They're not the best, they're not the worst. Definitely something to be considered when building a list. If you're going heavy on Blight Kings, bring 1 or 2. The Glotkin, my favorite model in all of Nurgle. I'm having a custom one built, mixed with a bunch of Tyranid bits, and I can't wait for it to be done. I'll send a picture on the channel when it's done. But he is my favorite model. He lost all of his support abilities. He has a countercharge, which honestly, it's just the threat of a countercharge more than anything that keeps that relevant. But he went down in points. He gained movement. He gained wounds. And he hits like a truck. He's your standard big killy monster. At 550 points, he feels pretty good. I like him. The reason I don't take him in some list is because priority target hurts this man really bad. Having a unit of archers or something be able to get +1 to hit and wound against him can make him sink pretty good. Varan Guard can rip into him pretty good. I've had Iron Guts rip this man off the table like he wasn't even there. But if you protect him well enough, you use Bodyguard, which if you bring him, always take Bodyguard. It can help, and he can do a lot of work. He was actually in my list for the GT I went 4-1 with last weekend. I do recommend him a lot if you have one. Morbidex and Orgots, they still do what they did in last edition. They are going to 4s on their beast attacks hurts a lot. It does. But almost everybody else went to 4s too. So it's not so bad. And him going to 4-up instead of a 3-up hurts a lot. But he also gained 2 wounds. And he supports the Nurglings, which he didn't before. And Orgots can give +1 to wound to other things, mostly Blight Kings probably. But still, I think these two are well worth their points. Well worth bringing on the table. If you can build a list around either of them, usually Orgots with Kings. Morbidex, all he needs is 2 units of Nurglings, and you have an entire flank that is just Morbidex and 2 units of Nurglings. And they can usually handle a fair amount of stuff. Don't underestimate his passes for Nurglings. It makes them extremely annoying. I also have Lord of Affliction in this tier. 230 points. Feels a bit high. But he's on a 3-up save. He's quick. He does mortals to 3 things in combat. And if you don't have a Great Unclean one, he is a premier taker for enhancements. I fully recommend bringing him. Try him out as your general. It's pretty good. And you don't need to do Affliction Assist either. You can just do him on his own. Blight Kings, solid. They feel good for their damage. 200 points, 15 wounds, 3-up save. Their damage is okay. I've gotten away from reinforcing them in most lists. You can still get away with reinforcing them if you have a Lord of Plagues, because that +1 attack on a reinforced unit is valuable. I wouldn't do it if you were bringing Lord of Blights. I would still bring 2 individual units. But having 5 to 10 Blight Kings in a list is not a bad thing. I wouldn't go all in, because at 200 points, they do rack up fairly quickly. I wouldn't go any more than, I'd say 15 Blight Kings worth is probably the max you'd want to go. 10 is a really solid number, though. And I do recommend trying to put them in list. Spoilpox I have in this tier. He's dirt cheap. He's only 100 points. He can fit under a Guo, which is great, because if you're bringing him, you're in a demon list. The only problem with him is Holy within 12 and a 2-up to activate the ability. If either of those were a little bit more lax, like if the ability was automatic, or like it was within 12 or Holy within 14, I think he'd feel better. But the thing is, he rolls so many 1s on crucial points, and that's his only job. He doesn't have a good combat profile. His range profile is really just a troll to throw snot at people. But I think he needs a little bit of help. We have abilities that are on 2-ups that really shouldn't be. But I think that's why he belongs up here. He's good in the certain build for him, but a lot of times he's making you an extra drop. And I'm beginning to think he's not worth the extra drop. And these are units that I feel are expensive for their cost. And you might wonder why the Great Unclean one's up here. Because if you've seen my videos, almost every video I have a Great Unclean one. And that's because when he has the enhancement, I feel like he's worth 480 points. The Witherstaff giving Strike Last, being able to revive demons, the being able to heal D6 at the end of the turn is extremely valuable. But if you bring one and you don't have the enhancements on him, he's 480 points for a swingy melee profile, a pretty good shooting profile, admittedly, 2 cast, and the chance to resurrect demons, which is good. But it doesn't feel like 480 points to me. Feels probably more like 450, 440. If he dropped down a little bit, I think he would be excellent to bring multiple of. As of now, bring 1, put your enhancements on him, you're going to get value out of him. The Harbinger is also in this tier. Honestly, with the nerfs to him and how bad he's become and lost access to Curse, I'm sorry, but this used to be my general in every game. Now he is unfortunately on a shelf decoration. In fact, let's just put him over here on this shelf. There, here, sit on this note card. It's very sad, as he's one of my favorite models, but he's just not good right now. The prayer he has is not good. He's an okay setup for it, but the thing for like your enhancements. But the thing was, the reason you took him is he was only 170 points versus the Lord of Affliction, who was 240. Now he's 200 points, and the Lord of Affliction is, I believe, 230 or 240. So the price difference isn't enough to lose the movement. You lose the mortal wounds, and if you bring him, you have a chance to bring a single Pasquale, which is invaluable, and I'll tell you why later. I have that for later in the video. I have Blowab up here too. The 4-up fly aura is still very good, although unreliable and swingy. If it goes off, it will win you games, just because -1 to hit is extremely valuable in the game right now. His shooting attack is a bucket of okay. The fact that it's 7 inches now is a little bit bad. Admittedly, it's a decent covering fire. He lost his +1 to cast. He still has the minus cast aura, but he's probably not getting that close to the monster, to the other casters that quickly. And his spell is it's really bad. It's useless. It's the same thing as old Gift of Disease was. Not Gift of Disease. Old Plague Wind was, where it's not worth casting for the miscast chance. It does too little, and it's honestly a really sad fall. I have Beasts in this tier as well. They are 150 points, which, if you combine with Horticulus' Revive, I'd say makes them worth it. The thing is, Horticulus gets exposed a lot putting down trees and will die. If you use Horticulus defensively, then I think Beasts are a great idea. But it requires a certain style of play to get the full value out of Beasts. And if you have them just on their own, why? I would almost never want them over a unit of Plague Bearers, which is 10 points cheaper. Like, their attention seeker ability is extremely good. The ability to run and charge, retreat and charge, to be able to redeploy and then just fling into somebody is really good. You can deny some tactics, you can muck up things. I've had one stop, take the flanks. I've had them do stop, seize the center. So they can be valuable, but they're just a little too expensive. If they drop to like 130, I think they'd find more homes, even 120. But the problem is they can't make them too cheap. If they go too cheap, you're going to go into that same problem of everybody doing beast spam again, and it's going to be a nightmare. So something would have to change. Maybe a power creep or something where these guys can be happy in the spot again. But as for right now, there's a little too much. And I have Rodigus in here, even though personally, I think he's pretty good. He's 500 points, which is expensive. But he's our only source of +1 to cast in the book. He casts twice, and his spell is game-winning. The problem is that it's game-winning turns 3, 4, and 5. Turns 1, it's 100% useless. Unless you have a Guo who got the spell off through a spell portal. And that's a stretch. But it's useless. Turn 2, it might do something. Turn 1 and 2, he's basically just going to cast your endless spells, which is good. That's perfectly fine. I just think he's a little too expensive for something that's really going to come into play in turn 3, 4, and 5. And his melee profile is okay. It's a bit lacking. He lost the shooting profile, which I think makes him a step lower than a Guo. And the fact that he's a War Master in this current GHB is a huge hindrance. You give something +1 to hit and wound against him, suddenly that 20 wounds isn't that durable. He gets shot by Sentinels twice, he gets charged by Raptidon Lancers, he gets charged by Chosen, Vanguard, even Brutes. He's either going to go down, or he's going to take a critical amount of damage, and we don't have the healing like we used to. Our best healing is Rally, because we usually don't have enough casters to just sit there and spam the Abundance of Flesh. But if you make a list for him, which I've done before, it works extremely well. You can completely shut an opponent out, and you can table them on turn 4. It can be very good. Granted, we're not a fast army. We're usually not tabling turn 2 or 3 anymore. That is old 2.0 Nurgle tricks. But yeah, he needs a list to build around him. But he can be good, but on his own, he's expensive. And then, these are the units who I say you either need a build for, or why would you bother? Puscoils, on their own, they're not worth 250 points. Now, if you're playing Affliction Cyst, and you want to bring a group of Reinforced with a Lord of Affliction, they can pull their points, and they can do work. But you have to use them correctly. The world kind of has to go right for you, but if you pull it off, they can clear a quarter of their opponent's army in one go. Only problem with that is, they're a quarter of your army. And after they charge in, they're kind of just a thorn in their side. They're not going to be doing heavy damage off the charge. You're probably going to take the point back that you're sitting on. So you're not going to have the bonus. I believe it's Rend. So they kind of just charge in, get stuck there, and do stuff, or your opponent kills them. They're not bad in one reinforced group, or a single, or a group, or a single and a group. But don't go all in on flies. I think you're going to have poor results. But they do have their place in certain lists. Then we have the Poxbringer here. He is our just Footcaster Demon hero. He's only 10 points more than the Rotbringer hero. But his only benefit is if he attacks, the Plague Bearers get to go immediately after, and they get +1 to hit. Even if you're going a Plague Bearer build, their damage is low. Giving them +1 to hit doesn't change that much, because if you have 20 Plague Bearers, that's 21 attacks if all of them go in. Giving them +1 to hit is nice. I don't think it's worth a drop, and I don't think it's worth using this over a Rotbringer Sorcerer who can drop boards and save you 10 points. So I'd almost put him on shelf, but there is niche uses for them. If you're doing a 60 Plague Bear spam list, putting 1 or 2 of them in is still a bad idea. I'd rather just have more Bile Pipers or Scriveners, honestly. But he can do something. His melee profile is not terrible, actually. He does have crit mortals. But I would definitely put him below Bile Piper or Scrivener. And the Rotbringer Sorcerer. And Nurglings. They lost their Deep Strike. They're 110 points. If you're making a list and this is all you can fit, they are perfectly fine. They're wonderful. However, you're never going to put them in a list if you have points for Plague Bears. Because 30 more points, this becomes Plague Bears, which is infinitely better. 20 more points, it becomes a Rotmire Creed, which is also good and better. The only reason you bring these is if you have a Morbidex. If you have a Morbidex, these Nurglings make their points and more. Don't underestimate the -1 damage per phase. That's hero phase, shooting phase, charge mortals, anything. These guys can live through a surprising amount. Giving them mortals on 2-up, or crit mortals, is very relevant. And +3 to their control score is also extremely relevant. You put this on a point, that's 6 on a point. If Morbidex is there, that's 11. That's a fair number of control score. And this is only 320, 110, 430 points. And this just walks up a side on its own. It does whatever you want it to do. It works. It's good. I recommend you try it. Mixed reviews against shooting. And don't let him get hit by a hammer on his own. But this will provide you a good section of your army, and they'll make their points back. Now there's a lot of, now that I have that part done, there are a lot of different styles to play of Nurgle, and I'm going to go over a few of them. First one I have, first I want to go over this. Most Nurgle lists is going to want one of these 2 packages. This is your disease spreading package. It's either Gut Rot and a group of Rotmire to spread disease in the back, or Horticulus. I know I talked about it a bit up here when I was comparing up here, but this is important. A lot of our damage now comes from disease. If you are playing the Taliban, you want to include one of these 2 sides, and you can augment it. You can put more Rotmire Creed in there. You can put a beast or 2. I usually just go with 1 beast with Horty if I do beasts, because he's nice to throw away at somebody. And I like to put him in the General's Regiment, run him in, and kill off the beast, so your opponent has a hard time getting Slay the Entourage later, and then you just revive the beast with Horty on your next turn. I've done it a few times. It's worked out pretty good. The beast will only need an 8-inch charge because you only need to get within an inch. Nope, it would still need a 9, actually, sorry. But it is valuable. I misspoke. Then you have your Demon Core list. This is the core start I would do for any demon list. Now, Horty is optional. I fully recommend him, but if you don't have him or you don't want him for some reason, he is optional. He's very good, though. You want at least 2 groups of Plague Bears. That's going to be your meat in the front. You want to go out because he supports demons extremely well. Plague Drones are your throwaways. They're your tactic getters. They're your throw them in, revive 2 of them later. And that's extremely good. And I put these here because you will want at least 1 of them in a Demon Core army. If you have 2 groups of reinforced Plague Bears, the Scrivener might give you more mileage. Not a ton, but it might. If you have anything less than 40 Plague Bears, it's Bile Piper all the way. Because Bile Piper doesn't just buff the Plague Bears. He will buff Great and Clean One. He'll buff Horty. He'll buff drones. I have killed a fair number of things, sending Horty in, all out attacking him, and then making it so he ignores their wards. There's a surprising amount of things this little snail can do with the Bile Piper support. But this is where I would say start with the demon list. And you can augment it any way you want. You can go heavier on the Plague Bears. If you don't want to do that, you can go 2, even 3 groups of drones. If you're crazy, you can go triple Guo and try that out. But it's fun, but you're not gonna... Yeah, it's something fun to bring to a 1-dayer. But I don't think you'll win a GT with Thricefold right now. Maybe after some points drops. Who knows? I did win a game with 3 Guos and a Glocken. But my recommendation for this style is to do something like this. 2 groups of Plague Drones, 2 to 3 groups of Plague Bears. I wouldn't reinforce them. Hordy, Bile Piper, Guo, and then probably a brick of Rotmire. Let's see, how many points even is this? Calculator. 180, 180, 130, 140, 140, 140, 150, 110, 480. This is 1650 in points, so you still got 350 points left. This is a pretty good start to a demon style list. It's only 2 drops at the moment, and you can add more stuff that you want. If you wanted, you could just add well, you could add, let's see, a beast would bring you to 1800. Then you get another drone or something. Maybe even a group of Blight Kings just give you that little solid punch. But this is a good start to a list. When I make my list, I always do them in shells. So I'll start with a core. Like in this list, the demon core is this. This is the core. That's how I start the list. And then I see what I need to add. It's how I've always built Nurgle, even before the battalions. And it even translates even better into this edition. But yeah, when you're making a list, find out exactly what you want it to do, and then you adjust the extra points to what the meta is. Maybe you need more drones, maybe you need more Rotmire, maybe you need a Magath Lord. It depends on the list and what you think you're going to go against. Also, practice it. Try not to make a list the night before and go to a tournament. Practicing a list lets you learn the weaknesses of it, the strengths of it, lets you learn how to play certain matchups. It does a lot. Before I go to a GT, I want to practice my list at least 20 games. Granted, not everybody has time for 20 games. If you practice 2 or 3, it's better than none. And I fully recommend TTS for practicing games, because if you have a friend on there who also uses TTS, you don't need to do the whole game. You can play out the first 2 turns, and that can give you an idea of how your list is going to do. Then you can either re-rack, you can try something else, you can make adjustments, you can do a different map. It's valuable to learn. You never think you have to completely do a full game to learn. That being said, it is good practice to try and squeak out every point that you can. But if you're on a time limit, if you have only like half an hour, do the first 2 turns. Test it. Have fun with it. The most important part is to have fun with it. If you're not having fun with the game, then take a look at it again. See what you can do to have fun with it. And if you're just not still, you know, at the end of the day, it is a game. We're here to have fun. But yeah, that's my demon core. Next one, oh, this is the Morbidex core. This is my nice little side flank. It's 320 plus 220, so 540. And this, I'll give this to a third of the board. They'll walk up together, and they'll take care of a lot of things. They're not going to go down and stare down your opponent's entire hammer, but every army has those little side flank units of like fast cavalry, or maybe a side unit of chaos warriors or something. This will take care of those. This will fight with those. And because of Morbidex passive, it will outcontest them on objectives. Don't reinforce them, even though you're going to lose out on the mortals, because this here on a point, let's see, 6, 12, this is 17 control score on a point. And it's very hard to remove. It's good, it's tanky. This is your premium fodder killer. You send this alone, and it does on its own. It's good. Next one is, I'm going to need a copy of you for this, the Affliction Sys setup. Now, there are 3 different ways to do it. And these are the 3 that I recommend. First one, a Lord of Afflictions and a single Pusk Oil. This is your take the flanks on turn 1. This is your seize the center if it's not a take the flank map. This is your I don't care that much if you kill them. They're going to be a little bit difficult to remove. They're your tactic getters. This is only, let's see, 230 plus 120. This is 350 points. That's not bad. The single Pusk Oil goes around, does tactic. He can do a cheeky take their land later. He can kill a screen. They're okay at killing screens. And the Lord of Affliction can brawl pretty well. He's not going to do a ton of damage, but he's not going to be easy to kill. 3-up save, 8 wounds, and a 5-up ward. This is your tactic side. If you're doing just this, I don't recommend doing the Affliction Cyst, but you can, because just putting those out there as a threat, it's not a huge investment in points. They're going to have to dedicate something serious to kill the Lord of Affliction, which will distract part of your opponent's army. And it can just be a great tool. If you learn it, you practice with it, it can make your opponent be like, maybe I want to take first, so that you're not going to gum me up with those. It's a threat. And a lot of AOS isn't what you do, it's what you can do if your opponent allows you to do it. Like the Glocken, his countercharge is really bad. You can throw a piece of fodder into him and lock him up. You can brick yourself up with your own units, or your opponent can brick you up with their units and stop you from countercharging. However, they have to respect the threat that it's there. If they don't respect the threat that it's there, you can win the game off of him doing a countercharge and then throwing Blight Kings into something, into Orgots into something. You will win the game off of that if they don't respect it and they let you do it. And that is almost more important than having the ability to do it, is the threat, because it'll make your opponent play differently. Same thing with the Affliction Cyst. It's the threat. If you're running something like this, your opponent is going to turtle up and put themselves in a box. Because this here, this is the striking version. This will go into the side, it'll punch a hole through their army, and then really just sit there, muck them up, and probably die. But it's going to do critical damage, and they have to protect their valuable things. If they don't, you can drop these right outside and say, okay, I'm taking first. Or make them take first to have to deal with it. It's the threat. But that's the main value of Affliction Cyst. This one is actually one of my favorite ways to do the Affliction Cyst, because I don't put them right outside and make them a threat. I say, okay, you want to go first. You set up for take the flanks. You put a fly on each of the flanks. And you say, okay, you've got to fight me, or you've got to try and get past me to score or take the flanks. And that can force a lot of armies into either giving you first turn, because they don't have a good tactic now that those are there, or having to pick a different battle tactic for the first turn, which on a lot of these maps, especially slower armies, don't want to do. So it's very good. It's threat, their utility, their throwaways. If you have a Guo, you get them back. They're 15 wounds, 5 up save, 5 up ward. Only 360 points for 6 of these. And you can revive 4 of them. That's excellent value. They will score you points. They'll make their points back. They'll give disease to stuff that you didn't think they would survive. And it's amazing. Fully recommend. The next one I want to talk to, I believe it's the Plague Cyst. It's the Mortals Exploding list. I think, personally, that the Mortals list is a little bit of the weaker side of Nurgle. I think that demons on their own, I think, are pretty weak. Mortals on their own, I think, are pretty weak. Right now, our strength, our best list building, is a mixture of the two. If you try and do just all demons, your damage is all from disease and all from a Guo. Drones do okay. They're not great. You need a little bit of a punch. You need Rotmire to spread. You need Plague Bears. You need a Magathor to punch. You need something for damage. And the spells can get you there, but we're not caster heavy. We don't do a lot of casting. So mixed force right now, I think, is definitely the way to go. This is my first core for the Mortal list. 2 Kings, group of Rotmire. It's good. It's basic. The Kings can do a surprising amount of tanking. Their damage is okay. Their main job is to sit on an objective and keep it. If this is on one of your friendly objectives, this guy's worth 9. Because we got 1 for the banner, 3 for their war scroll, and 5 for the units. That's a lot in just this 200 points. It's worthwhile. It's good. Another one is more of a ranged heavy build. If you're doing this one, I almost recommend not being in the Mortal Battalion, because Taliban will get you more value. But if you have probably 3 or 4 groups of Rotmire, I think this one would be worth it. Because you're basically like, hey, if you're going to get in melee with them, you're probably going to take some splash. It's not going to be a bunch. Out of this group, you're probably going to get 3 mortal wounds when they die. But it's not nothing. It's a little bit of a deterrent. It can make the difference between, with disease, like killing a fast unit that got to them. It can be valuable. And then if you're doing that one, I also fully recommend this. One of these. These are the same. Yep, I just made 2 of them. Alright, ignore that. But the Rotbringer Sorcerer is very good because it reduces the wards. It's a good caster, it's 120 points, and it's a Lord, so you can bring one of these 2 under it. These 2 are good Blight King support. Only problem is, like I said over here, they're a little expensive. For 30 more points, you get another unit of Blight Kings, which is better in every sense of the word. Only reason you wouldn't is if you need something to take your enhancements, or your points are a little bit stiff, or if you already have 2 units of Blight Kings, you can throw in a Lord of Blights. If you have a reinforced brick and a single one, throw in a Lord of Plagues. He works great with a brick of 10. He works better with the lone groups. But they do have value. They can bring value to the table. They'll get their points back. And they can hit surprisingly hard. And then that's pretty much it for the human one. And then I have my favorite one personally, the one that I play most. This is my Glocken core. I always do the Glocken alone with a group of Blight Kings. They always take Bodyguard. This turns him from dying to Varengard to a good chance to live. An Archaeon can go into him. That -1 attacks to all of his profile from the Bodyguard is very big. You just run them behind him. You don't charge these guys. You never charge these guys because then you lose the Bodyguard. And you keep the Glocken holy within 6 of them. You can do a surprising amount of damage reduction. And if you've been watching my videos, you've seen the work that this has done. It's worked great against Fire Slayers. It's worked against Slaves. I don't think I have a Slaves video up actually. But it's worked really good against several different armies. And then I always bring 2 units of Plague Bearers. Because in this one, these Blight Kings, they don't want a front line. They are supporting the Glocken. These are you kind of just one off to the side. They're going to get your... One of them is going to be for your... take the flanks on the first turn. But they're your side support. They're your fodder. They're to get in the way so that the Glocken can come in and hit whatever hit them. I fully recommend it. Alright. Those are basically the main cores that I go for the army. There's one last thing I want to touch on. As the endless spells. Now there are only 2 that I really use and that I really recommend. First one is the Spell Portal one. Sorry, I don't remember the name. I use it mainly... Well, I was originally using it for Spell Portal. Because the idea was you cast Spell Portal with a Guo, and then you throw your disease spell through it. Which is really good at making your opponent waste a command point to rally it away. So, it's okay. It's niche. If it's your turn going second and your opponent's out of command points, or they only have 1 left, it can be a good way to get that last command point out of them. And it can be very useful. The main 2 reasons I have this, though, is for Palisade and Geminids. Geminids is amazing. I have walked them into a group of archers, Sentinels, and killed 12 Sentinels with just this spell. It's 8 attacks, 3s, 1 Ren D3. They can't all-out defense. They can't do anything if you have this in. If you put these into something, and then the Glocken follows them behind, they can't all-out defense. That 2 Ren is a lot more scary when they can't all-out defense. And you will do a lot of damage. Palisade, depending on how you position it, it can protect you from shooting. It's better when your opponent is really far away. Say I have this group of 10 here, they're all the way back there, and I'm down here. If I drop the Palisade right here on top of myself, that group has to move farther to try and get an angle on me. It can be useful. It can muck up your opponent's shooting. More importantly, it can make the shooting unit go to where it doesn't want to go. It can be nice and safe here, but say you have some drones sitting off to the side, or you have a Magathord over here. Suddenly they've got to go to one of these sides and get closer to get a shot. It's all about positioning. You can also put this between some terrain more than 3 inches away from you and completely block them from getting to you. Which I did to stop some dragons from doing Slay the Tyrant on a Guo. And yeah, I mucked my opponent's entire turn, which led me to win the game. Very good. Takes a little bit of practice and know-how. Pre-measure before you cast it. Next one is Primal. This has been my go-to for many of them. If you have big monsters, having a Livestorm walk around and help, it's amazing. If you're against somebody that has War Machines, or even not, the Burning Head does a surprising amount of damage. It hits on 2s, I believe it wounds on 3s, 2 rend. It can do work. It's pretty good. And Jaws is just a good spell. 3d6 move, bonus damage on the charge, 10 attacks, I believe 4s and 2s, 1 rend, 2 damage. They can't unbind it in one go. They'd have to do it over 2 turns. It's reliable, it's strong, it's very good. And I have Kronspine here. I barely ever use Kronspine. The only time I would take Kronspine is if none of these would go into effect. Most of the time in Nurgle, we're going to have 2 to 3 casts. We're probably going to cast just this. Maybe this on my opponent's turn. This, if we have an extra time, we usually don't. Or maybe just this. If you have 1 cast, put a Kronspine in your list. If you have 1 or 2 casts, and it's you're not going to have a lot of flexibility. You don't really need the healing. You don't have big guys. Jaws would be okay, but this can do what Jaws does too. Geminids, turning off commands. You feel like you don't really need it, or you're not going to get the use out of Palisade. Bring a Crown Spine. Casting it on your opponent's turn is one of the most heartbreaking things you can do to your opponent. Casting it on your turn is still pretty good. It's not a bad model. It can do some damage. More importantly, it can muck up a side, which Nurgle is more about positioning than dealing direct damage. But alright, that is my Nurgle review video. It was a bit of a ramble. I had been collecting thoughts. I've been testing things. I'm sorry it took so long to get this out. I wanted to have a firm grasp on every unit in our book before I decided to do anything, because I didn't want to make any statements that I would regret. I believe everything in our book has a purpose, has a place. There are even lists where Blowab I think would be good. Blowab would function fairly well in a demon control list. That -1 to hit coupled with the Plague Bears and giving them the -1 to wound spells is really good. It can make them very durable. It can turn that matchup of trolls or ogres, which is normally extremely difficult, much better for us. But it's all about positioning, and he is more delicate than the other ones. But yeah, that's been my review on Nurgle. I hope you all enjoyed. If you agree with me or you disagree with me, let me know. We can have a discussion in the comments. I try to respond to every comment I see. There's been getting more and more of them, so it's been a little bit harder, and I apologize, some of them take me some time. But please let me know if you enjoyed the video, what your thoughts are, and I hope everybody has a good day. Goodbye.